When I became president of the Calgary Labour Council in 1979, one of my first duties was to sign the papers for the sale of the old Labour Temple on 11th Avenue. It was sad. There's a lot of history in that building, but it had simply grown too small for us. The decision had been made because most of the major unions had already moved out. This is a complex job because the temple was financed by selling a lot of shares to workers and their unions for $1.
We had all of the names of people who had shares. And my boss at that time was business manager of the Bricklayers and Allied Craftsmen's Union, was Carl Victor, and he was president, volunteer position of the Calgary Labour Temple. And so it became my job to go looking for the people who had bought these dollar shares. And so I learned a little bit about history that way.
In the early years of the 20th century, Calgary was known as a radical centre. When the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, were made illegal by the federal government, their Canadian branch met at the Labour Temple to reconstitute themselves as the One Big Union.
Take possession of the means of production, abolish the wage system, and all live in harmony with the earth.
The One Big Union went on to play a pivotal role in the Winnipeg General Strike.
I remember the fellow by the name of Tom Fick from Winnipeg. He was a fellow that was involved in One Big Union. And the first time I met him, and I was a little bit shy, he says, "Don't worry about some of the fellows," he says. "Your day will come," he says. "I know your day will come. Just sit back and listen, and if they don't want to talk to you at first, you're an outsider at first, when the first time you come in." Union isn't one person. The union is a membership, and you have to make sure that there's always somebody coming up in the ranks. That's democracy.
Depression and drought. That was the 1930s in Alberta. Farmers faced blowing dust, and workers endured the breadlines. In 1932, they came together at the Labour Temple to find a political solution. The organization they formed was the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. Its constitution was formally adopted the next year as the Regina Manifesto.
No CCF government will rest content until it has eradicated capitalism and put into operation the full program of socialized planning, which will lead to the establishment in Canada of the Cooperative Commonwealth.
By 1935, there were very few people at Labour Temple meetings. Union membership had dwindled to marginal levels as workers were forced to take any work they could find just to feed their families.
At that time, all the unions existing in Canada were being attacked by the employers, not only by layoffs, but by deliberate, continual policy of wage cuts. And any fringe benefits they ever had, everything was being stripped from them. The employers were at war with the working class openly.
However, some organizing was going on, especially among the unemployed.
Believe it or not, Calgary made history. We were the first city in Canada to form the Central Council of Unemployed Unions.
1,000 relief camp workers from all over BC gathered in Vancouver. Under the leadership of Slim Evans, they boarded freight trains heading on to Ottawa. Calgary supporters began their preparations. The women made 2,400 sandwiches in the Labour Temple. When the train stopped on 9th Avenue, the trekkers were met by Calgary activists, including Pat Lenihan. They formed up and marched to the Stampede grounds, where they stayed for 2 days. When they left, 500 Albertans had joined with them on the trek. On July 1st, 1935, the RCMP violently broke up the On to Ottawa trek in Regina. 1 man died, scores were injured, and more than 100 trekkers were arrested. By 1938, the Great Depression had dragged on for almost a decade. Workers were looking for radical solutions, including communism.
The party decided that I should run in the election for an aldermanic seat A committee was set up embracing the unemployed organizations and the party itself, and we discussed the question of under what ticket I would run. The majority finally decided that I should run as a people's candidate. The unions were still practically no membership, but the leaders were CCF Labour people. They, of course, had their headquarters in the Labour Temple. Through private talks, we got it arranged. Anyway, when election day came around, we had all the polls manned and we had a good machine. That night, about 9 o'clock, we knew that I was to be elected.
This rare example of cooperation on the left elected a majority of aldermen, Lenihan and 3 from the Labour CCF. By the 1950s, the McCarthy era of communist witch hunting had brought a chill to the Labour Temple.
It was very tough in those days, especially for me, because I was what I consider a progressive left-winger, and most of the delegates were right-wingers. And when I first started going there, the back row was always nice and comfortable. You could see the whole thing from the back row. So I started sitting in the back row, and there was guys like Dave Worthing, and there was a whole bunch of other people there that were the same way as me. I realized afterward we all felt the same way. It didn't take me long to realize the officials of the Calgary Labour Council didn't think the same way as we did. So we used to deliberately bring up motions to create debate on the floor. And believe me, there was debate on the floor. And the right-wingers got so fed up with us one day. A motion was made and passed that the back row be eliminated. And that may God strike me dead, I'm not telling you real life, exactly what happened. So as soon as that happened, Dave and all of us, we just got our chairs and moved forward one. There was a big row there empty, but we were still the back row.
In 1954, the Labour Temple gained a second story.
It has absolutely gorgeous terrazzo steps when you come in the front door. The foyer and the steps up and down are terrazzo, and it's almost a lost art nowadays. The offices were not large. You were a bit crowded. The atmosphere was marvelous. Carpenters, Labour Council, painters, IBEW 254 and 348. The building trades had an office there. Plasterers had an office there. When I first went there, the Alberta Federation of Labour had an office. And when you went down the stairs, after coming in the front door, tucked under those stairs in a closet-sized room were the New Democrats.
And like any given time of day, you could go and visit with somebody, and there was always people coming in there and visiting. I learned a lot there.
We all got along really well. We used to have a ball, Stampede Week. We used to go to the Noble Hotel. We called it the Hoddle Nobble. And we would bring beer back from lunch and put it in the water in the back of in the tanks on the toilets and have cold beer. It was really a relaxed time, a period of time.
The idea of a national union of public employees, which became CUPE, was born in the Labour Temple.
Our first meeting, I'll never forget it. We met on a Saturday in a small room about the size of the kitchen here in the Labour Temple. And right in the center of the floor was about 4 dozen beer in a big tin tub. And there we are, all the prophets, the wise guys sitting around this tub and discussing the building of the provincial body. Calgary, we had 37, 38, local 8, and that was it, I guess. And then we had 2 from Lethbridge, 1 from Medicine Hat, and we had the clerks from Edmonton, the outside from Edmonton. We had 10 or 11 locals, and they agreed. After a day, they all agreed that we'd call a convention. We also had endorsed the idea of a national organization.
Do you know that the Calgary Labour Council was responsible for the formation of the public ambulance service in the city? When I came here in Calgary in 1949, there were 2 private ambulance services, one that ran on the North Hill and one that ran on the South Side. And they received, I believe it was $100,000 a year from the city to run their privately run ambulance service, which wasn't very good.
I remember several times you go to a car accident, and if the competition company was ahead of you, you would block their back door so they couldn't get their stretcher out. And if they had a patient in the car, we'll say if there's a car accident, there's a couple of patients there, they might have left one in their car, sitting in their car or on a stretcher, and they've gone to go get the other patients down in a ditch or wherever. We'd come along and we'd steal their patients and put them into our cars and take them away. We used to do that to each other lots. Sometimes there would be fist fights that'd be involved. We always left our ambulances running. You know, you just left your keys in the car and running. Well, sometimes you'd get back to car and your keys would be gone. They shut your car off and throw away your keys.
For many, many years, we pleaded with City Council to form a publicly run ambulance service. We were turned down. One thing led to the other, and I got support. We got support from some of the aldermen. They finally realized that something had to be done. The aldermen formed a committee to look into the whole matter. Art Roberts, one of our delegates, was appointed to the committee. So once again, we went before this committee with a brief outlining our reasons why there should be a publicly run ambulance service where no profit was involved. After about 2 more years, they finally brought it in the late 1960s, I believe, or early 1970s. They finally brought in a publicly run ambulance system. After that, other cities followed. But we were the ones, in my opinion, because we kept plugging away.
But it was a much better service with the city taking over. At least you were guaranteed pay, you were guaranteed clothes and uniform to work.
The Labour Temple continued to be a centre for municipal politics, but the legacy of the Cold War had shattered the unity on the left.
I tried to form a civic party called the Calgary Labour Action Committee. We drafted a constitution, we drafted bylaws, we drafted a program, but I made one big mistake, a mistake which I regret to this day. When I was introducing the program, and I said, anybody in Calgary who is opposed to the present administration can join our group for $5 per member, and that would include socialists, Tories, liberals, communists. As soon as I said the word communist, it was picked up by the press, and it was an uproar. On the Sunday, we were going to meet on the Sunday, a special meeting to form the party. And as soon as the motion was introduced, a person jumped up from a member of the Local 37, who was opposed to the issue in the first place. He moved the motion that the meeting adjourn. It was carried, and that was the end of that party.
The focus shifted from Labour putting forward its own candidates to giving support to existing candidates who promised to respect Labour's principles.
It was always known that the Labour movement elected the mayor, always elected the mayor. And if you wanted to be a mayor, you had to be on the right side of the trade union movement, and particularly the public sector unions. And then we used to always get candidates. They were happy to come and talk to us because they knew we could get our people out to vote. And we worked hard at it, especially in the civic unions and the school board unions. We used to say to them, you can elect your own boss. Like, get out here and get busy.
Then the city changed to a ward system.
That knocked it out. Because prior to that, you got a city-wide vote. The working class are not concentrated in this city, in one particular spot. And no matter where the working men were, no matter what end of the city they were in, they could vote for you. You see, as a Labour man, we lost all representation on hospital boards, library boards, civic bodies.
The Labour Temple was also the centre for organising around national and international issues.
When Trudeau brought in his wage and price control, all it was wage control. There was no control over prices, but there sure as heck was on wages. I organised the march when Cesar Chavez came into Calgary, and me and Dave Worthing, I believe, met him because he was asking for help, and we did the best we could.
Twice a year, the Labour Council would run their schools at the temple.
We would run maybe 6 or 7 different subjects. Would be public speaking, parliamentary procedure, negotiations, politics, health and welfare, these things.
I found it very, very thrilling and interesting because you did learn a lot of stuff. And you were exposed to these people that you weren't always exposed to through your local union because the men went everywhere.
Meetings at the Labour Temple were changing. More women were getting involved.
It was up until about 1970 and it was both the city of Edmonton and the city of Calgary. You had to quit if you got married because they assumed that your husband would look after you, that you didn't need a job. When there was only a couple of us, or 3 or 4 of us women, they kind of tolerated us. But after it got, if you kind of got more and more women, they weren't terribly nice.
It was really quite a chore to go to union meetings. And the only time we did was when it was negotiations. But when we did go to a union, and it was in the Labour Temple, in the meeting hall down in the basement, the first thing they would do was make an announcement that there were women at the meeting, watch your language.
Well, as long as you didn't say very much and you put your hand up at the right time, they didn't say anything. It was that kind of tolerance. They didn't, as long as, but if you, and of course me, I was always set your mouth. I would always bring up stuff. They didn't like that. If you wanted to bring in something like, for example, we were always fighting daycare legislation. You could talk to your blue in the face and you couldn't even trade, I'll support this for you if you support this for me. They just didn't have a clue.
Slowly, we began to make our voices heard.
I was vice president of the Labour Council. I was the second vice president of the Alberta Federation and was instrumental in trying to, get women's issues brought to the forefront. That was, although I was interested in social issues, and I can remember saying that sometimes they weren't women's issues, they were people's issues. I thought it was really a place to help working people, and I always remember too, when I first got involved, particularly when I went to Labour Council, you could get up and say whatever you liked, within reason, of course, and nobody said you're stupid or you're not or whatever. They didn't always agree with you. A lot of times they didn't agree with me, but they gave you the right.
The Labour history didn't stop when we sold the temple. It became the Flamingo Restaurant. We used to gather there after our meetings and talk about how to turn the motions into action. The last official function in that building was the 50th anniversary of the On to Ottawa trek.